All right, so back to the notes. This is problem number 2. It's found on page 362 in your book, and it wants to know what is each real number root. That's the same thing as the directions on the last example said. It said what are the real cube roots and what are the real fourth roots. Well, when it asks what is each real number root, that means the exact same thing. Okay, sometimes the hardest part about these problems is figuring out exactly what they want you to do. So for this one, it is an odd index and a negative number underneath. Odd means there's only going to be one real root. Because this is negative, my answer is going to be negative, and the cube root of 8 is 2. So if you multiply negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, you get negative 8. For this one, there's not a number written here as an index, so it's understood to be a 2 as a square root. This is even, and it's positive underneath, so I'm going to have 2 real roots. They're going to be plus or minus. And then I want to know what's the square root of 0.04. Okay? You've got to be careful doing these in decimals or you end up with your decimal in the wrong place in your answer. I think this is easier done in fraction form. This is 4 hundredths, so it's 4 over 100. And then the square root of the top is 2. The square root of the bottom is 10. To leave it in fraction form, you have to reduce it to plus or minus 1/5, or you can put it in decimal form, which is plus or minus 0.2. Now for part C, this is a fourth root. That is an even index, but I have a negative number underneath. When you have an even index and a negative underneath, there are no real roots. And for this one, what you have to do when you have some exponents underneath, you must simplify under the radical first before you do anything else. Okay? So, negative 2 squared, that's negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. And then you can take the square root of 4. There's not a number written here, so it's understood to be a 2. So that's even, positive underneath. My answer will be plus or minus, and the square root of 4 is 2. All right, and now let's talk about reading the directions and understanding what you're supposed to do. If the directions say find all roots, or it might say find each root. Each and all is the same as far as these directions go. All right, so find all roots. That means you're going to have a plus or minus answer for an even index. Okay, and remember, if it is an odd index, you're only going to have one answer, period. Okay, so if the directions say simplify, you are only going to give the principal root, which would be either 0 or a positive number for an even index. Okay, we don't have to worry about a principal root when there's an odd index because you only have one answer, period. Okay? So now, the next thing, there's a box in your book on page 363 that talks about the nth root of n powers. And it sounds a little bit confusing, But this is what you're going to do when you have variables in a radicand. Okay? If it's numbers under there, you don't have to worry about this. But you're going to use this when there are variables under the radical. So now it says for any real number, the nth root of a to the nth. Well, you're going to have two scenarios here. If n is odd, then your answer will be a. However, if n is even, you are going to get the absolute value of a. Okay? So now, I've got a couple of fairly simple examples here that we're going to do, and then we'll get to the ones that your book uses. Okay, so we're going to start out with the fourth root of x to the fourth. Well, here, my index here and my exponent underneath are exactly the same. So it's exactly the way this is stated. But my n is even. So it's going to be the absolute value of x. So now, I want you to know where this x comes from. What is our shortcut for figuring out what it is? If you will take the exponent and divide it by the index, it will give you the exponent of the answer. Okay, so exponent divided by the index equals the exponent for the answer. All right, so now if you take a look at this next one, those numbers are not the same. I've got to figure out whether I'm going to need absolute value or not. But I can figure out what my answer is going to look like. If I take 12 and divide it by 4, I get 3. I get x to the third. Well, do I need absolute value or not? This is not real clear about that. So here's where I'm going to try to clear it up and make it a little bit better. If you'll look at this one, this was even index, even exponent, and it ended up being odd. I needed absolute value. Even, odd, you get absolute value. So let's check this one out. This is an even index. This is an even exponent. And I ended up with an odd exponent. So I need absolute value around that variable. For this one, I'm going to end up 8 divided by 4 with an x squared. So let's see if we need any absolute value here. This is an even index, an even exponent, and it ends up also being even. So no absolute value needed on that one. So when you have even, odd, the variable needs absolute value. So now here are the examples that your book gives you. Okay, we're going to do these 3 together, and then I'm going to give you 3 to try on your own, and then we'll check back in and see how you did. So where we start for this one, we're going to just take it apart and do one piece of this at a time. Start with the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4. And now to take the square root of x to the 8th. Remember, this index is a 2. So 8 divided by 2 will give me x to the fourth. So when I'm looking at the variable, I want to look and see if I need absolute value. This is even, even, even. I do not need any absolute value. Okay? I want you to take a look at the directions here. It says, what is a simpler form? That's just like saying simplify. Okay? I'm looking for the principal root. This is when we have to check for absolute value. Okay, if it says find all roots or each root, we don't have to worry about absolute value. But if we are simplifying, we have to check. Okay, and this time it's even, 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 so I do not need any absolute value around that variable. Now for part B. This is a cube root, so I'm going to take for my A. 6 divided by 3 will give me A to the second. And for B, 9 divided by 3 will give me B to the third. My index is odd, so there's no way I'm going to need any absolute value. Because remember, absolute value says even, even, odd. Well, this doesn't start off even, so there's no way I need absolute value. And now for part C, start out with my X. 8 divided by 4 gives me X to the second. And for Y, 12 divided by 4 is going to make it Y to the third. Now, do I need any absolute value? Well, let's check. For X, even, 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 I don't need it there. And for Y, even, even, odd, I do need it around my Y to the third. All right, so now I've got 3 that I'm going to have you try. And then we've got a word problem that we'll talk about. And we may just talk about it in class. I may not include it in the video here. But go ahead and pause the video. See if you can work on these 3. When you're done, or if you get stuck, come back and check it with mine, and we'll go from there. All right, so for part A, I'm going to take the square root of 81 and get 9. And now for my variable, remember, square root, my index is a 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. My directions say simplify, so I have to check for absolute value. And I only check it on the variables. So even, 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 I don't need any absolute value. For part B, this is an odd index, so it is not going to need any absolute value. So 12 divided by 3 makes it A to the fourth. 15 divided by 3 makes it B to the fifth. And there's no way this one can be even, even, odd, because the first thing is odd. No absolute value. For this one, 12 divided by 4 is X to the third. 16 divided by 4 is Y to the fourth. And let's check them. Even, even, odd, that one needs absolute value. Even, 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 my Y to the fourth does not. So I'm just going to put absolute value here. And then, like I said, there is problem number 4. We're just going to discuss it in class instead of including it in these videos. Okay? Make sure when you come to class, if you have questions, you ask me. We'll find more examples if we need to, and we will get plenty of practice working on these.